It all started like any other morning. The sun was barely peeking through the curtains, its faint light casting a soft glow over the room, but it didn't seem to bring any warmth. The coffee machine was making its familiar, soothing hum, filling the kitchen with the rich, bitter scent that always seemed to settle my nerves. I shuffled into the kitchen, still half asleep, rubbing my eyes, trying to ignore the growing tension that seemed to hang in the air between me and my wife, Claire. It had been going on for weeks now, maybe even longer. I wasn't sure when it all started to change, but something was definitely different. It felt like we were strangers passing through each other's lives. And it wasn't just the silence. It was the little things. The way her eyes would glaze over when I tried to talk, like she wasn't really listening. Or how she'd always be on her phone, scrolling through messages, checking emails, anything but making eye contact with me. The warm, open conversations we used to have had become rare, replaced by awkward pauses and half-hearted remarks. Our relationship had always been one of passion, and we'd been together for over 5 years. At least that's what I told myself when I tried to ignore how much things had changed. But over the last few months, the cracks had started to show. I didn't want to admit it, but it was as if Claire was slipping further and further away. I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out of the window at the gray sky. I was hoping that the fresh morning air might clear my head, but it only seemed to make the knot in my stomach tighten. The silence between us had become so heavy that I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. I wanted to say something, to ask her what was going on, to figure out why things felt so different, but I wasn't sure where to start. Every time I tried to approach the subject, Claire would either brush me off or change the topic with a quickness that left me speechless. "Good morning," I mumbled, half expecting her to not even acknowledge it. She hadn't been great at responding to my greetings lately, but I was still holding on to some sliver of hope that maybe today would be different. "Morning," she muttered back, her voice flat and dismissive. She didn't even look up from her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with an intensity that seemed almost obsessive. It was like I wasn't even there. I felt a flicker of irritation rise in my chest, but I pushed it down. Couldn't let it get to me, not today. I took a slow breath and forced myself to smile, despite the growing unease inside me. She wasn't a morning person, I told myself. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe it had nothing to do with me, and I was just imagining things. I reached for the coffee pot, pouring myself a cup, and tried to focus on something else. The steam rising from the mug was comforting, the warmth spreading through my hands. I needed something familiar to ground me, but every time I looked at Claire, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was pulling away from me. I tried again. "How did you sleep?" She didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, I thought she hadn't heard me. Finally, she glanced up, but her eyes were distant, as though she were somewhere else entirely. "Fine," she said quickly, without much emotion, and then went back to whatever she was doing on her phone. I was getting frustrated, though I tried not to let it show. For a second, I considered pressing her further, but I knew it would only make things worse. Claire had become so defensive over the past few months, always brushing off any attempt at meaningful conversation with a cold remark or an eye roll. It was like trying to talk to a brick wall, and each failed attempt made me feel more and more helpless. I felt like I was losing her, and that thought was the hardest pill to swallow. I had always prided myself on being a good husband, someone who could be there for his wife no matter what. But no matter what I did or how hard I tried, nothing seemed to bring her back to me. It was as if I didn't even know the woman I'd married anymore. I couldn't put my finger on when it all started. It wasn't like there was one specific event that caused this rift between us. It was more of a slow burn, a gradual shift in the way we interacted with each other. At first, it was just a few disagreements here and there, small things that didn't seem important at the time. But then, those small things started to pile up. She'd snap at me for no reason, or give me a look that I couldn't quite decipher, a look that made me feel like I was walking on eggshells around her. I had thought that maybe it was just stress at work, or maybe she was going through something that she didn't want to talk about. But now, as I watched her stare blankly at her phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was going on. I didn't know if it was just me, or if she was just as lost as I was in this relationship. "Are you going somewhere today?" I asked, trying to make some small talk, but even that felt forced. I knew she had been traveling a lot lately for work, often leaving early in the morning and coming back late at night. Sometimes she would leave for a few days at a time. "Yeah, I've got a few meetings," she said, her voice barely rising above a whisper. There was no enthusiasm in her words, no energy. It was just a statement. She didn't even bother to look at me when she said it, her eyes glued to the screen in her hand. I tried to ignore the pang of hurt that sh*T through me. When we first met, she used to talk to me about everything. Her work, her thoughts, her dreams. But now it was like I was nothing more than a roommate, a convenient companion to fill the space next to her. And the worst part was that I wasn't sure how to fix it. No matter how much I tried, it always felt like she was pulling further away from me. It wasn't just the lack of conversation that bothered me, though. There was a certain coldness in her tone, a hardness in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. She wasn't the Claire I had married. The woman I fell in love with had been kind, warm, full of life and laughter. But this version of her, the one sitting across from me in the kitchen with her phone in her hand and a blank stare in her eyes, was a stranger. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was going on. I had to understand what had happened to us. I stood there for a moment, the mug of coffee still warm in my hand, but suddenly feeling like it was the last thing I wanted. I set it down on the counter, my fingers slightly trembling. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The frustration, the confusion, and the aching uncertainty were all building up inside me, ready to spill over. "Claire," I said, my voice a little shakier than I intended. "I need to know what's going on. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. You're distant, cold even. And She cut me off, her voice sharp. "Oh, here we go," she muttered, rolling her eyes without even looking up from her phone. "You've been so dramatic lately." The words hit me like a slap across the face. Dramatic? Was that how she saw me now? How long had she been thinking that? I opened my mouth to respond, but I couldn't find the words. I was hurt, confused, but mostly I felt invisible. "I'm not being dramatic, Claire," I said after a long pause, my voice steadier now. "I'm just trying to figure out where we went wrong. I miss us. I miss talking to you, spending time with you, feeling like we were in this together." She scoffed, finally looking at me, but her gaze wasn't filled with understanding or concern. It was filled with frustration. "You're just upset because I'm busy with work. You know how this is. You think just because I'm not sitting around at home, waiting for you, that something is wrong? You've always been like this, so needy, so clingy." Her words were like daggers. It felt like she had just dismissed everything I was feeling with one quick jab. But worse than that, it felt like she was no longer interested in hearing me. No, she wasn't just indifferent. She was actively rejecting me. "Needy? Clingy?" I echoed, my voice rising with disbelief. "Claire, I've been patient, supportive. I've never asked you for anything except to be present, to just be here with me. And now you're telling me I'm being clingy." She rolled her eyes again and let out an exasperated sigh. "You just don't get it, do you? I'm not here to entertain you. I have my own life, my own career. Maybe you should focus on yours for once instead of micromanaging me." I stared at her, my mind racing. Every word she said hit like a blow. But the strangest part of all was the realization that I hadn't seen this coming. I knew we were drifting apart, but I didn't know how deep the divide had grown until now. This wasn't just an argument. This was her revealing the truth of how she saw me now, and it wasn't pretty. I swallowed hard, trying to push the lump in my throat down. "Maybe you're right," I said quietly, my voice raw with emotion. "Maybe I'm not the person you want anymore. Maybe I'm not enough for you." That last sentence lingered in the air between us, hanging like a cloud. I wasn't sure where it came from, but it was the truth, and it hurt more than anything. Claire didn't answer right away. Instead, she just looked at me with that same coldness in her eyes. "I'm going on a trip tomorrow. Work stuff. I'll be gone for a few days," she said, as if the words were nothing more than a casual statement. It was like a switch flipped in my head. For a moment, I felt frozen, paralyzed by the sudden coldness in her tone. This wasn't just about her being busy anymore. She was clearly shutting me out, closing off the part of her life that I had once been a part of. The realization hit hard. She was leaving. And this time, she wasn't just physically going away. She was emotionally detaching herself from me. When she said she was leaving, I didn't know whether to be relieved or heartbroken. There had been a part of me that wanted to just leave everything behind, to walk away from the constant tension and discomfort. But then I remembered why I'd stayed, why I had been fighting for this relationship. I didn't want to give up on us. But how could I keep fighting when she wasn't even in the same ring anymore? "Where are you going this time?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the whirlwind of thoughts in my head. "Chicago," she replied with barely a glance in my direction, already turning back to her phone. "Just a few meetings. It's important. I'll be back in a couple of days." I nodded, though part of me felt like I had been punched in the gut. Chicago, another city, another business trip. I couldn't even remember the last time we'd gone somewhere together for fun. It used to be that we traveled, explored new places, and built memories. But now it felt like I was just waiting for her to come back and tell me about the latest city she'd been to, while I remained stuck in the same routine, the same unspoken distance between us. "Okay," I said, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. I turned away, unsure of what else to say. But as I walked out of the kitchen and into the living room, I had an unsettling thought. Something didn't feel right about this. Something about the way she had said it, the way she had dismissed me so easily, felt off. I wasn't sure what it was, but a chill ran down my spine. And then, in the silence of the room, a thought emerged that I hadn't considered before. A possibility that I could no longer ignore. When I discovered what Claire had been doing during these trips, I knew I couldn't stay in the dark anymore. Whatever she was hiding, I had to find out. I needed to know the truth.